A Hard Day's Night is the third studio album by English rock band The Beatles, released on July 10, 1964, with side 1 containing songs from the soundtrack to their film A Hard Day's Night. The American version of the album was released 2 weeks earlier, on June 26, 1964 by United Artists Records, with a different track listing. This is the first Beatles album to be recorded entirely on 4-track tape, allowing for good stereo mixes. In contrast to their first 2 albums, all 13 tracks on A Hard Day's Night were written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, showcasing the development of the band's songwriting talents. The album contains some of their most famous songs, including the title track, with its distinct, instantly recognizable opening chord, and the previously released Can't Buy Me Love. Both were transatlantic #1 singles for the band. The title of the album was the accidental creation of drummer Ringo Starr. According to Lennon in a 1980 interview with Playboy magazine, "I was going home in the car and Dick Lester, director of the movies, suggested the title, Hard Day's Night, from something Ringo had said. I had used it in his own right, but it was an off-the-cuff remark by Ringo. You know, one of those malapropisms. A Ringoism, where he said it not to be funnier. Just said it. So Dick Lester said, we are going to use that title." In 2000, Q placed A Hard Day's Night at number 5 in its list of the 100 greatest British albums ever. In 2012, A Hard Day's Night was voted 307th on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Contents. Musically, A Hard Day's Night eschews the rock and roll cover songs of the band's previous albums for a predominantly pop sound. Sputnik Music's Dave Donnelly observes short, peppy pop songs characterized by layered vocals, immediate choruses, and understated instrumentation. According to Pitchfork Media's Tom Ewing, the lack of rock and roll covers allows listeners to take the group's new sound purely on its own modernist terms, with audacious chord choices, powerful harmonies, gleaming guitar, and northern harmonica. Music journalist Robert Christgau writes that Lennon-McCartney's songs were more sophisticated musically than before. Side 1 of the LP contains the songs from the movie soundtrack. Side 2 contains songs written for, but not included in, the film, although a 1980s re-release of the movie includes a prologue before the opening credits with I'll Cry Instead on the soundtrack. A Hard Day's Night is the first Beatles album to feature entirely original compositions, and the only one where all the songs were written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Lennon dominates the songwriting, being the primary author of 10 out of the 13 tracks on the album, all except, And I Love Her, Can't Buy Me Love, and Things We Said Today. This is also one of 3 Beatles albums, along with Let It Be and Magical Mystery Tour, in which Starr does not sing lead vocal on any songs. Starr sang the lead vocal on Matchbox during the sessions. It appeared instead on the Long Tall Sally EP. Cultural influence. According to music critic Richie Unterberger, George Harrison's resonant 12-string electric guitar leads were hugely influential. The movie helped persuade the Byrds, then folk singers, to plunge all out into rock and roll, and the Beatles would be hugely influential on the folk rock explosion of 1965. The Beatles' success, too, had begun to open the U.S. market for fellow Brits like the Rolling Stones, the Animals, and the Kinks, and inspired young American groups like the Beau Brummels, Love and Spoonful, and others to mount a challenge of their own with self-penned material that owed a great debt to Lennon-McCartney. Reissues. On February 26, 1987, A Hard Day's Night was officially released on compact disc in mono, along with Please Please Me, with the Beatles, and Beatles for Sale. Having been available only as an import in the US in the past, the 13-track UK version of the album was also issued in the US on LP and cassette on July 21, 1987. Stereo mixes of A Hard Day's Night, Can't Buy Me Love, and I Love Her had been made available on the first compact disc issue of 1962 1966 and 1993. Most of the rest of the tracks appeared in stereo on compact disc for the first time with the release of the box set The Capitol Albums, Volume 1 in 2004. On September 9, 2009, A remastered version of this album was released and was the first time the album appeared in stereo on compact disc in its entirety. This album is also included in the Beatles stereo box set. A remastered mono version of the original UK album was part of the Beatles in mono box set. Track listing, all tracks credited to John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Charts and certifications, North American release. The American version of the album was released on June 26, 1964 by United Artists Records in both mono and stereo, the fourth Beatles album in the United States. The album went to number 1 on the Billboard album chart, spending 14 weeks there, the longest run of any album that year. All 7 songs from the film, the first side of the UK album, were featured along with I'll Cry Instead, which, although written for the film, was cut at the last minute. The American version also included 4 easy listening styled instrumental versions of Lennon and McCartney songs arranged by George Martin conducting an orchestra of studio musicians, I Should Have Known Better, and I Love Her, Ringo's theme, and A Hard Day's Night. After EMI acquired United Artists Records, this album was reissued on August 17, 1980 on the Capitol label, Catalog SW11921. While the stereo version of the album included the instrumental tracks in true stereo, the Beatles' own recordings appeared as electronically rechanneled stereo recordings made from the mono releases. The 1980 Capitol Records release used the same master tape as the original United Artists stereo release, despite the availability of several tracks with official stereo remixes by that time. True stereo versions of most of the songs appeared on the Capitol album Something New, released in July 1964. Can't Buy Me Love, and I Should Have Known Better finally appeared in stereo on the Apple Records compilation Hey Jude in 1970. The song A Hard Day's Night did not appear in stereo in the US until the compilation LP Real Music in March 1982. In 2014, the American version of A Hard Day's Night was released on CD individually and in a boxed set of all the other US Beatles albums to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Beatles' first US visit. This CD reissue features all of the songs in both true stereo and mono mixes. Track listing, charts and certifications, chart succession, personnel, John Lennon Euro vocals. Acoustic and electric guitars. Piano. Harmonica. Tambourine, Paul McCartney Euro vocals. Acoustic and bass guitars. Piano. Cowbell, George Harrison Euro vocals. Acoustic and electric guitars. Claves, Ringo Starr Euro drums and percussion, George Martin Euro piano, Norman Smythe Euro bongos on A Hard Day's Night. Notes. References. External links, Beatles comments on each song, recording data and notes on mono stereo mixes and remixes.